So as some of you guys know what the music videos, I'm unplugged today. All right. Okay, at that point. Have you ever wondered what Christmas is all about? Last week we began looking, and I think if you wanted to find out what Christmas really means, certainly you wouldn't look to the commercialization of it or the things that we see around us. Last week we began looking, or a couple of weeks ago we began, and last week we looked at a particular verse, and we went to the very source of why Jesus came. If Christmas is really about Jesus coming to give us life, then why did he do that? And we looked in the passage of Luke 19 when Jesus himself, in the discourse with Nicodemus, not with Nicodemus, but with Zacchaeus, after that particular event, Jesus said this to them: I came to seek and to save those which are lost. What great words that Jesus gave us. But even more so than that, you say, well, I've already received Christ as my Savior. I understand that there is no way to heaven in the joy of knowing Christ unless I come to Him and I have accepted Him as Lord and Savior. But what happens with life as we begin to live it? Our world is filled with unhappy and discouraged people, isn't it? Dissatisfied, looking for something to make them happy. And even many of those are people who claim to be Christians. People everywhere are looking for that happiness. And very rarely do they ever find it. They almost never do. This might explain why our world is filled with some of the problems it is. When you look at the reality of things that you see on in the newspaper and on TV, when you hear it talked about all around us, and you say, Dale, these are terrible things to talk about at a Christmas season when we ought to be filled with joy and excitement. But folks, let me tell you, even during the season of Christmas, things run rampant like divorce and suicide, thoughts of suicide, those who think they can't live anymore, drug dependency, alcohol abuse, criminal behavior, sexual impurity, depression, pornography, and it goes on and on and on and on with the things that people are dealing with day in and day out. We simply call it life, don't we? Those are real, aren't they? It'd be good if we could just hide ourselves somewhere with a jolly old fellow with a red cap on who laughed and said, ho, ho, ho. Wouldn't that be neat? And all the problems of the world simply go by the way. But Christmas is really not about that, is it? What is the solution? None of the things that we've talked about so far were ever able to bring happiness in them. Then what is the solution? Is it wealth, pleasure, power, or even religion? Everyone has an answer, but none of them seem to work. And man, did I have something special for you this morning. But having all this techno stuff means that sometimes we have techno difficulties. How many of you have watched this year so far a movie that was made back in the 40s called It's a Wonderful Life? Any of you know anything about that? It's a beautiful little film, isn't it? It's a traditional feel-good movie. But yet you find George Bailey, who thinks he has tried to live his life and everything he has done has seemed to come to disappointment. And finally his uncle has misplaced some $8,000 in that building fund bank that they had started and he had kept existing while his brother had been able to go off to war and come back as a hero and all of those things. And he thought his life was meaningless. But when they did that, there was a run on the bank and Potter was about to buy out his bank. And he thought, wow, how can this be? We find him getting angry. Not only angry at himself, but angry at God and angry at everybody around him. And he comes to a place where he almost commits suicide. And then guess who shows up? Anybody remember the angel? Clarence. I don't know where that came from. But Clarence shows up. And Clarence shows him what life would have been without him. And there he stood on that bridge about to cast himself off. And then realized, hey, life is worth living. Life is worth living. He goes back home and he runs back home and he greets everybody. He talks about the emporium, the bank, and he even waves at Potter as he goes by. He comes home. He goes up the staircase, and as he had done every other time he went up the staircase, he took the corner post top off of it. He runs back down and he puts it back on it. He hugs his children. His wife's not there. He comes in, and then lo and behold, his friends start to show up. and he found out what he really meant to people in life. Man, wouldn't it be great if fairy tales happened like that? Everything just worked out. Well, you know the reality of why Christmas comes, and Mike has already shared that with you. And if you didn't catch it, in what he read to us, it was not simply in the fact of the birth story of Jesus that we read in the book of Matthew, but it comes later. In understanding not only did Jesus come and seeking to save those which were lost, he also said, here in the 10th chapter, when he said, I am the good shepherd. And my sheep hear my voice, and none other will they follow. And I try to bring them in, and I bring them under my wing. And Jesus gave a purpose for that. And if you're here today, I want you to hear this. It is not those things that we had mentioned earlier. It is not even the fairy tale that brings that. But Jesus said in John 10:10, I came that you could have life and have it more abundantly.